When Joe Biden turned 80 earlier this month, he officially became the oldest sitting president in U.S. history. It's a milestone that's added new fuel to a long-running debate about whether he should run again in 2024, a move Biden has hinted at but not actually confirmed yet. And the angst amongst Democrats is palpable, as Mark Leibovich captured in The Atlantic, arguing the age issue will only get worse if Biden runs again. The whispers are becoming shouts. Mark is the author of the new book, Thank You for Your Servitude, and a staff writer for The Atlantic. Jeffrey Sonnenfeld is the founder and CEO of the Chief Executive Leadership Institute at Yale School of Management. Good to have you both, gentlemen. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good to be here, Jim.
Mark, you wrote first line of your piece earlier this year. Let's put it bluntly, Joe Biden should not run for re-election. He is too old. Why?
80. I mean, you know, that was the number. Look, I don't want to be ageist here. Now I'll be ageist, I guess. I think you will talk, people who study aging, people who study, doctors basically who are expert in this say that it is true that aging is different from person to person. Some people actually do fine at that age, but I think in most cases, it would be better suited to have someone younger in that job. And obviously, it's not for me to decide, but my sense is the Democrats, have been very risk averse in some ways in the age of Trump. I mean, Trump has made Republicans just terrified of him, but at the same time, Democrats have been extremely nervous about doing something, maybe a little different in the future, like sort of tapping someone who might have a different perspective. So I think that it's time for that. But again, I'm just one person.
Well, actually, you're two people. In the spirit of full disclosure, a spirit I rarely embrace, Jeffrey. I'm with Mark on this, but you write age is a dangerously misleading disqualifier. Can you explain that a little bit?
Both of you with your youthful minds are perfect examples how experience doesn't get in the way of your freshness and your ability to think innovative thoughts. We take a look at across fields. Betty Friedan, the great, of course, feminist, told me at age 67, she said that she found the age mystique to be the most formidable bias, even more than the feminine mystique. And as you look at a lot of our leaders, as anybody watching this show think that they could outsmart the very savvy Nancy Pelosi at age 82, or regardless of how you feel about her politics or his politics, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell certainly has been awfully clever at each stage of his life, and he shows no sign of wilting. Benjamin Franklin wrote the Declaration of Independence at age 70, the Second World War, people like Charles de Gaulle and Averell Harriman, these people are all in their 80s. And
yeah,
frankly,
but Jeff, if I may interrupt you, you can obviously cherry pick, and I don't mean that as disparagingly as it sounds, 80 and 90-year-olds who do wonderfully well. But as Mark just said a minute ago, let me put this up for a minute. Here's a study out of the cognitive decline on cognitive decline in JAMA. And another study, the second number, the National Library of Medicine, when you're over 85 years old, which Joe Biden would be in the third year of his second term, 40% of people that age live with serious cognitive impairment. So you know what Joe Biden is like now. You have no idea what Joe Biden's going to be like in 5 years, right, Jeff?
Joe Biden had a stutter when he was 70, when he was 40, when he was 30,
I'm not talking
and
about
when he was 9 years old, when he was 7 years old. Joe Biden would say goofy things and sometimes come up with cringeworthy jokes at every stage in his life. It has nothing to do with age. As Mark and you said, and Mark said, I don't want to be ageist, and then went right off to be ageist.
Well,
if you don't want to be ageist, Mark, I can liberate you. Drop your chains. Stop being ageist. In fact, you said you can think of any demographic category and you can find average trends that will favor one group or another. Happily, we live in a society which is based on merit and individual assessment. We don't go for what color hair somebody has as to whether or not they fit a job.
Jeff, let me stop you there for a second. Let's go. You cite geriatricians, Mark, in your piece. in The Atlantic who say exactly what Jeff is saying, which is it should be on a person-to-person basis. But you seem to be saying, obviously there can't be a formal age limit because the Constitution says, I think, 35, born here, I mean, naturalized citizen, born here, and I think you have to have lived here for at least 14 years. But informally, you basically think there should be an age limit, no?
I mean, I think it is a person-to-person thing, and I think that voters should decide. I mean, basically, age limits are a little bit, they're dicey. I mean, there are age limits for air traffic controllers. There are age limits for drivers. There probably should be age limits for like a maximum age in which you can drive for. I think it varies from state to state. Sometimes you have to take a test or something like that. But look, I just I don't love age limits, but I do think that there is a certain self-awareness and self-knowledge and basically selflessness that someone who reaches a certain stage of his or her life, should be mindful of when deciding, whether the future of the country, whether the future of, his immediate orbit is best served with him still in the chair.
Jeff, you say, Mark says he doesn't like age limits. I know you really don't like age limits, but Mark cites in his piece, I think it's air traffic controllers 56 or something, pilots 65, and I assume both because if they can't perform adequately, they put me at risk. If a president can't perform adequately, he puts, or she puts everybody at risk. I don't understand why broad numbers about age groups don't matter to you as much as your judgment of an individual years before he reaches that age group.
Because there's no real science that supports this. That JAMA study is badly flawed. You'll be the first to hear this, and Mark will admit this on air. He didn't actually read the research in that study to see what instruments they used. If you look at the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Survey, which is what these studies rely upon, it tells us the older we get, the dumber we get. Now, Mark, why is that? Jim, why is that? It's because it has a speed versus accuracy trade-off built into it. So a younger person makes fewer mistakes in the measures they used. Makes more mistakes, but they're not penalized for that. An older person weights more. They use wisdom, and the error pattern in an older person in those same measurements is very low, but they just don't finish the damn test, and they are scored down for that because of the instrument's design. You go for these averages, and you miss everything. The reality is an individual assessment. That's what's lost here.
But if you may, but Jeff, I'm sorry, you're still not answering my question. Your assessment is the 80-year-old Joe Biden. Even if you reject, let me finish. Even if you reject what JAMA Neurology says, and I think it's a pretty respected journal, but even if you reject it for the moment, you have no idea what Joe Biden's going to be like as an 85 or 86-year-old man. I mean, that's obvious, is it not?
We have a better idea of an older person's character than we do in how the CEO of FTX. I'm right here at an event with Sam Bankman-Fried, just footsteps away from me. To have a 20-something kid, we don't know what that person's going to do. And would you rather have that or Elizabeth Holmes?
Well, I don't think that's a fair choice. I don't think I want Bankman-Fried to be president of the United States either.
Billions of dollars in these people. So if you took, and Mark comes up with, you talk about cherry picking, and Mark comes up with an example of air traffic controllers. Now, why would that be? Yes, it's because speed of reaction is lower. If manual dexterity matters, maybe on an assembly line, maybe an air traffic controller, where you have speed of response, that does make a difference.
Mark, do you want to respond to any of this?
Not really. I mean, I am cherry picking, but I actually think that this is a very narrow cognitive, area that is relevant. I mean, cherry picking is picking examples, to make your own argument.
Our elder statesperson.
Let him finish. Jeff, let him finish, and then you can say whatever you like. I'm sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
No, look, my only point is that as a consumer of politics, as someone who, it's one of tens of millions of people who gets to pick a president, I would prefer someone younger, and I would hope and I would think that the Democrats would be better served to have a bunch of younger options.
If you felt differently, Mark, if when the 2024 approached or primaries approached, if you were to feel like I think most primary voters concluded several years ago that Joe Biden at 82 was the most likely Democrat to beat Donald Trump, would you swallow your principle and say he's the man?
Oh yeah, it's not a principle. I think it's important that he win. I think it's important that Democrats win. I think, there's a very strong argument to be made that they are probably most likely to win with him, despite his age, though. And I do think that his age is a big despite. And look, I talked about risk aversion before. I mean, I think Joe Biden's single biggest contribution to this country and to life, I think, it was beating Donald Trump in 2020. I think voters, the Democratic voters, particularly in places like South Carolina, decided that he had a very practical chance, or the best practical chance of doing it. And it was a major contribution. He might be called upon to do it again if people believe that he is best suited for it. I would like to think that there are better candidates.
Jeff, in my eternal search for common ground, would a compromise position here be that there should be cognitive testing of candidates for higher office once they reach, pick any number you want, 60, 70, 75, 80, everybody, no discrimination, everybody of that age has to take a cognitive test and the results are made available to the voting public. How about that?
If you do it at every age, sure, but I wouldn't just start it at a certain senior's age.
Someone just went to the men's room behind you, by the way. But go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
by the way, the half a dozen times when I've interrupted you guys, only some of it is because of my obnoxiousness. Some of it really has had to do with just because they keep letting out a crowd at the event where I am right now. So,
but you can live with cognitive testing, correct?
If you can look at Joe Biden's schedule, there's hardly anybody. And look at how he crisscrossed the nation just in the run up to the elections, seeing President Xi Jinping, the G7, and all the rest, going to the heads of Canada, UK, Germany, right after. Who could do that at any age that's watching this show? You take a look at Konrad Adenauer at age 87. He brought the modern state of Germany back to life and brought it back into the world community. And at age 90, he was still running the Christian Democratic Union, the presiding power. Nobody talked about his age. Look it up. And look in any newspaper, people celebrated him. They were sorry when he stepped down. This age was not a relevant issue until now. We have baby boomers that are, raising becoming a question of being attacked by other age segments. We shouldn't fall into this ageism. There's really no justification for it. If there's anything we should retire, we should retire the bias around age.
Jeff Sonnenfeld,
No,
Mark Leibovich.
So.
Oh, you have a final thought, Mark? I'm sorry.
No, I don't think we should retire the bias around age, because age is just a number.
On that note, Mark Leibovich, Jeff Sonnenfeld, great to see you both, gentlemen. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks.